Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Ahlan wa sahlan wa marhaban bikum and welcome to another edition of Debunked here on INX Prime. My name is Suliman Ravat. In recent weeks, the headlines here in South Africa have been dominated by Donald Trump's utterances and remarks, his executive orders, and those of his close advisor, Elon Musk, born South African, as well as his Secretary of State, Marco Rubio. There has been a tangible effect in terms of the cut of aid when it comes to those suffering from HIV and AIDS, and there's been a lot of speculation in terms of the long-term impact. And as a result, featured in the President's State of the Nation address, where he said, "We will not be bullied." There has been a lot of criticism and condemnation of the likes of AfriForum and others who stand accused for having provoked this. And there's been a plethora of views in terms of how South Africa should respond to this position taken against the South African government by the President of the United States. Now, my guest on the program today is Reverend Frank Chikane. He is currently the chairperson of the steering committee for the Global Anti-Apartheid Conference for Palestine. He's also a former director general in the presidency and an author. Reverend, a very good day to you and welcome to the program.
No, thank you very much, and greetings to those who are watching.
Let me start off with this question. What do you think is behind the motivation of Donald Trump in terms of these executive orders, these utterances, his posts on social media? Some have speculated and said that he's misinformed. Others have said, no, he knows exactly what the reality is, but he's a racist white supremacist. He's part of a group who want to once again re-establish white supremacy on the planet. And then those who say, then there's another view that, look, he's a transactionalist, he's a businessman. That's his career, and there is something in it for his business dealings and for Elon Musk and his buddies. That's why he's taking this approach. What are your thoughts in terms of his motivation?
Well, I've expressed this view and I need to repeat it, that when I watch what's happening in Washington, the Trump event is helping us to understand better why people in Europe and the United States support Israel to commit genocide against Palestinians. This is a colonial, pre-colonial way of thinking, where the West, which is really white supremacist, where the white world took a position that everybody else is not a human being except themselves, and that they can do whatever they like. That's why they went around and got Africans and put them in ships and boats to the Americas as slaves, and they treated them as property they own, and they are not human beings. The period of colonization, the same. They went throughout the world, Asia, Africa, Latin America, everywhere, and colonized everybody, treated them as less than human beings. I always say, Britain treated us here as less than human beings when they had a democracy. So democracy was for themselves as white, and the rest don't deserve any rights whatsoever. I think that's what we are experiencing from Washington, and it's the West manifestation of it. I said it's helpful. It is helpful because it tells the real story. I mean, there's no way in which you could be in Europe and support the massacre of Palestinians, genocide prohibited in terms of the convention they have signed. But if you try to do the same in Europe, they will fight you to the end. And so this is really racist. I mean, it's quite clear. But then they sell themselves out because now they link up with the real racists. I mean, the children of apartheid, who are both still here and others are outside the country, have gathered around Trump, and they link up with this racist remnants of the old and take positions, like in South Africa, about land. I mean, how do you make a decision that, I mean, there's land expropriation without compensation when it hasn't even begun to happen, but you are acting in any way. And then you act in the interests of the whites who are complaining, but you've never acted in the interests of Black people who have been complaining. I've said that my family has been removed twice during my lifetime. In 1953, when I was about 2.5 years, they were thrown into a place where it was just a bush, left their homes. And my father built a modern house. But by 1962, they removed them again without compensation. There's no Trump who's taking a stand and saying, this is unjust and it's really bad, because he uses the word really bad. It is really bad that we don't have our land back and should be helping us. But instead, and I want to end there before I come back to you, instead, this colonial way of thinking is that we have no rights to claim anything. They are the only people who determine what happens. And that's why he talks about removing people from Gaza. Yeah. Let them go to Jordan or Egypt. That statement on its own is a genocidal statement. But he has mentioned it, and they have no respect for international law. I mean, even the idea that you've got a ceasefire and he can just make a statement that the ceasefire must end on this Saturday, and then hell is going to break loose when there are agreements reached. No respect for the law. And I think we've just gone back to the jungle, pre-colonial period, etc. And that's what the Trump moment is about for me.
So if you're saying that his behavior is primarily motivated by racist tendencies and white supremacist tendencies, what does that tell us about the American electorate then? Because it's not the first time they've put Trump in office. One could give the benefit of doubt and say the first time around, perhaps they didn't know, it was a misunderstanding, miscalculation. But he's won the popular vote. More than half the electorate know what he stands for, and yet they put him back in the White House. What does that tell us about the mindset of the majority of the American voters?
That's why I'm saying the Americans must take responsibility. I know it's not all Americans. I mean, but the majority voted for him. And they must take responsibility for what he's doing. They can't dissociate themselves with it, unless, of course, they voted against him and lost. And so it reflects the racism that is inherent in the society. It's not the Americas alone, and Europe. I think Europe must take responsibility. We need to remind them that up to the end of apartheid, they supported the apartheid regime. The Europe and the United States, even the bill on anti-apartheid, which went through Congress, was against the wishes of the president of the time. And so they have been holding the same group of people who supported apartheid here, the same people who support genocide against Palestinians. The Americans, the British, the French, the Germans, same group. And you'll recall that in 1993, after we reached an agreement, they came here and asked to dismantle the nuclear weapons. They even helped the apartheid system to develop nuclear weapons here. But when we had to take over, they said, no, they are coming to dismantle them and take them away. And we said to them, well, you can take them away because we want a nuclear-free Africa. And so that racism hasn't gone. What I think the Trump event does is to actually bring it to the surface. So there's no pretense about it.
Now, in terms of AfriForum and the like in South Africa, where many have argued that they provoked what we're now seeing from Trump, when they made trips there. They've come out and said, don't blame us, blame the policies of the government. We're not saying it's a genocide, but we have concerns about clauses within the Expropriation of Land Act. And we have a democratic right to raise those issues. And they talk about farm murders and the like. They have been overwhelmingly condemned by even white South Africans, by even fellow Afrikaners and farmers. How should South African society be dealing with this grouping within our own borders?
My first response was just ignore them. You know what I'm talking about? Because the more you talk about it, the more you popularize their strange way of thinking. They are a minority of minority groups. They are based on lies, and they are based on the fact that they are the only ones who have rights and can have land that they took from other people without compensation, which is my family. They never got compensated, but they feel because they are white, they need to be compensated when you do it. So it's an unequal type of logic. Now, my view is this thing has come to destabilize our country. We worked hard for social cohesion, where blacks, whites together, live together in peace. And they bring this issue and want us to think about Afrikaners as if they are not part of the society in which we live. I mean, Afrikaners are saying we don't agree with them. And so I think my view is we must take a clear stance. We will not allow racist views amongst us, and we're not going to be dragged into that space. We're going to build a South Africa where everybody lives together in peace and solve the economic challenges we are facing. Because the economic challenges are still express themselves in terms of the color of the people. So apartheid as a system has ended, but the consequences of it and legacy is still with us. And we must focus on that and ignore these strange ideas which come from a minority of minorities.
What advice would you give the South African government? There are those like Ambassador Ibrahim Rasool who say this is not the time for megaphone diplomacy. We've got to increase engagement. There are those like Julius Malema who, in other words, are saying tell the US and tell Trump to go to hell. We can learn to stand on our own 2 feet. There are those who feel, no, you need to be a bit more circumspect. We're not yet in a position where we can stand on our own 2 feet. We need the aid. We can't be poking the bear too much, as wrong as the bear may be. We don't want to antagonize him too much. There are those who are saying try and make a special accommodation for Elon Musk in terms of Starlink and him not wanting a BEE partner. What advice would you give to the Ramaphosa administration in terms of how to deal with this issue?
Well, firstly is that we shouldn't reduce ourselves to that level of Trump's action and the racists who work with him. I don't think we should. So we shouldn't expect the president to be having a shouting match with them. A president of a country acts with dignity, and the statement they've released is sufficient in my view. This came through a Twitter. We don't do diplomacy through Twitter. We do diplomacy through diplomatic channels, and that the government will interact with everybody in the world through diplomatic channels, including Washington, and state exactly what our positions are, and that we're not going to change because we are threatened with sanctions or be punished for the principles we stand for. No, I don't like the idea that money must determine how I think. We have gone through that before with the apartheid system. We resisted that. There were people who came to buy people to abandon the struggle and collaborate with the racists. We said no. And they said, we're going to kill you. We said, go ahead. And we stood our ground. And so South Africa should not reduce itself to changing its principles and commitment to justice because of money. That can't determine that. Otherwise, we lose our sovereignty and we lose actually our dignity as a nation. So we need to stand, but do it with dignity. I mean, you can't go and speak like a street kid when you deal with this matter. So I think we are handling it well. We don't have to, I mean, our case in the International Court of Justice stands. And it's a just cause. It's supported by the greater part of the world. Our stance on the issue of diversity, respect for diversity, equality, and sustainability. That's a position that's held by most of the rational thinking international people. So it's not like we're alone. By the way, some people in South Africa think we are just the only victims of Trump's orders. We're not. And so it doesn't mean we should change our character. I am proud to be a South African, and I'm proud for what we stand for. And I'm proud that we have a constitution that can be used to victimize an Afrikaner. It's impossible in our constitution. It's not the same as the US Constitution. I mean, you can't wake up in the morning and pardon your son or withdraw the pardon from people who committed crimes because they were on your side. It won't work in South Africa. We have a constitution that will not permit. So they mustn't drag us to going back to where they are. When we did our constitution, we used the Canadian and Nordic countries' constitution to get the best of constitution, because the US constitution, the British, are not the best.
Finally, then, on the issue of Palestine, you alluded to this earlier on, Trump saying, they will take Gaza and they must go to Jordan and go to Egypt, and he kind of, some feel, ambushed King Abdullah of Jordan by making those remarks whilst they were in front of the cameras, etc. Is this just Trump rhetoric, or in terms of the Palestinian cause and Palestinian activism, is there a genuine concern that he may try to follow through on this, or that the ceasefire deal may not hold because he's likely to pander to what Netanyahu wants? Netanyahu has said he's the best US president for Israel.
No, but you see, we must take this seriously. I don't like the idea of undermining it. The point is, President Trump has gathered Zionists around him. And those Zionists are the ones who are dictating this approach. And those Zionists are people who don't recognize Palestinians as human beings. In fact, one of them has said, what is a Palestinian? There's no such a thing as a Palestinian. Zionists don't want to have Palestinians in Palestine. And I'm talking about mandate Palestine, if you want to go back to 1948. They want them out. And what Trump is talking about, it's exactly to achieve that objective. That's why they are now committing genocide in Jenin and in the West Bank, because they want Palestinians out. And our response must be that we cannot allow this genocide to happen. This is genocide. In fact, what is right is for the people in Gaza who are refugees to be allowed to go back to their homes in the current Israel, because that's where they were thrown out from. Some of them have keys, still have keys for their homes. I met one family in Bethlehem that said, we still have keys. The house is in West Jerusalem. And fortunately, they are Arab Israelis. They could take me there and show me the house and say, this is our house, but they've taken it. We still have keys for it. If you want to do justice, the Palestinians who are refugees in Jenin should be allowed to go back to their homes and live in peace. That's what we really need to happen, not what they are talking about. What they are talking about is genocide. Justice means the refugees must be able to go back to their homes. And the attack on Gaza, Jenin, etc., and they attack refugee camps. You know, when I visited for the first time in 1988, I couldn't understand why you have a refugee camp in the country where people come from. It was so funny. And they said, no, they are refugees because they were removed from Israel. And so what they are doing now is to attack those refugee camps so that that concept of return, Palestinians' right of return, can be cancelled by killing the refugees or throwing them out of Palestine. I don't think we should allow that, and that's why we are forming a chapter in South Africa against this apartheid system, and we're mobilizing the world. We need the world to take a stance to make sure that this Zionist racist project comes to an end.
Reverend Frank Chikane, thank you so much for your time and for joining us on the conversation. We really appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
And to our viewers, until next week, inshallah, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.